Our next speaker is Lan Senator. Lan is a designer, founder and owner of the Dépanneur, and co-founder of the Newcomer Kitchen. Lan created a food-focused community space outside the boundaries of the traditional restaurant. Through the Dépanneur, Lan showcases culinary talents, promotes innovation in the good food sector, and collaborates with food entrepreneurs to expand the horizon for food in Toronto. Newcomer Kitchen is a project that invites newly arrived Syrian refugees women to cook a weekly meal in the Dépanneur's kitchen, and the proceeds are shared among the cooks. Lan creates spaces where interesting food things happen. Its presentation is entitled Designing for Meaning.
Okay, so this is going to be a slightly informal chat, sort of leading you through a bit of the history of the Dépanneur and the things that emerged from it over the last few years. The Dépanneur is a venue that I established to try to showcase the amazing talent that we had in the city, but it was also a design project for myself. So flashback to 2009, I had been a designer about 15 years. I was a partner in a design firm, but I was interested in how to potentially do something more meaningful, something that felt more tangible, more immediate, more directly engaged. We were trying to embed that in our work through corporate social responsibility, consulting, and other things like that, but I got to the point where I thought it might be faster and more efficient for me to just go and do something worthwhile than spend all my time convincing other people that that's what they should be doing. And it took a while to figure out how or what to do, and the inspiration came from some unexpected places. One of them was actually from a fortune cookie, which said, "Enough is as good as a feast," and this idea sort of resonated with me. You know, instead of trying to figure out how could I make the most possible amount of money or do the biggest possible scalable thing, what could I do to get to enough? What was enough? And in my case, it turned out it wasn't actually a whole lot. I'm a cheap date, I don't have a lot of expensive taste, so I didn't need much. So the question was, how could I get to enough in the most fun, interesting, meaningful, worthwhile way? And that kind of set the intention for the project to emerge. And then, as I thought about it, I decided, you know, what medium did I want to do this? And, you know, what problems did I want to tackle? And I mean, one of the problems that really struck with me is this whole notion of inequality and that seems to be rising, that polarization that comes from it. And too big of a project for me to take on directly, but what could be an approach towards it? And since I've been someone who's always sort of gone through life stomach first, this idea of doing it through food made a lot of sense. Food was a really universal human experience. It leapt across culture and language and age and gender and geography to create these shared, very fundamentally, universally human experience. It seemed like a medium with a lot of potential, but the traditional restaurant model did almost nothing to take advantage of what I thought, you know, this incredible power food could have. So from these ideas, in my neighborhood, I discovered this convenience store around late 2010. It was what I might call an inconvenience store. It had bars on the windows and chains on the doors, and in the window was this hand-scrawled note saying "business for sale." And after a number of phone calls and dealing with some extremely unusual individuals, I managed to secure myself a very, very low cost, which was important, 5-year lease. And I kind of gave myself a mandate. I'm going to go in, I'm going to explore the possibility of food to create more meaningful experiences. And I'm going to, if I can do it for 5 years and get out of it no poorer than when I started, I will have considered this a major success. So one of the things as I undertook kind of a renovation process, and as well as I kind of came as another way of looking at this this question of good enough, was a concept called satisficing that I came across in Stuart Brand's amazing book, How Buildings Learn. And it's about just getting to good enough. You're never actually going to get to perfect, and the returns diminish, even though the effort just keeps going up. So really, get to good enough, and then take it from there and then see what emerges from that. And that was an important idea that really kind of pushed the project forward. So everything that we put in there was found, reused, recycled, repurposed in some way. It really put a limit to how fancy anything could be, which suited us just fine. So come 2011, we had turned this corner store into a little space. There was a notion that I was going to I had this multi-pronged approach. I was going to be a combination cafe corner store during the day. We were going to have a brunch, and we were going to launch these supper clubs. I was intrigued by the notion of pop-up dining, this idea that people could host, come from both amateurs and professionals, could showcase their talent. But I found that in Toronto there was this huge barrier to entry. The costs of setting up the entire infrastructure to host a pop-up food event were just absolutely onerous, and so only incredibly well-capitalized people could pay to play, and the resulting events ended up being incredibly expensive. So you had to have a lot of money to participate in them all, and both of those things made it uninteresting to me. So if I could create a venue that had everything you needed, you didn't have to reinvent that wheel, you could have a much broader diversity of people who come and participate as cooks, right? And have a much lower cost event, so a much greater diversity of people could participate. And in this way I could kind of disentangle quality from luxury. I look back on the food experiences in my life that have been most memorable and most meaningful, and they weren't the ones that were the most expensive or the fanciest ones. And so how could I disentangle quality from luxury and prove that these more meaningful, more interesting experiences could be done without having to make them really fancy to be great? And I believe in that way, as this ties into this notion of meaning, that if it's more fun and interesting and meaningful for the cook, because they had a whole bunch of creative freedom, that it'd be more fun and interesting and meaningful for the diners as well. And we also launched a brunch program, we did all these things, and so we get 1 year into the program, and it's a total disaster. Okay, I've lost all my money. I am scraping the bottom of my line of credit that I had used to hold this whole thing together, and basically I had to radically pivot. And so, but one of the important things was, because everything was done on the cheap, and everything was done to be just good enough, that it was a non-catastrophic failure. And this had a chance to learn from everything that happened and pivot and find a new direction and build on all the emergent lessons that were learned. And so we started to chant, fired all the staff, and had to single-handedly kind of reprogram the whole thing. And I created a set of drop-in dinners where anyone who's passionate about cooking could come in one night a week, make their favorite dinner. People could drop in, grab a bite to eat, and we'd split the revenue. We added classes and workshops where people could share their skills and passions around food. I was forced by the city to add another washroom, and since there was nowhere to put it, I had to take over one of the sort of really squalid downstairs basement apartments, and to pay that rent, I turned it into a rental kitchen and added that into the mix. We started to use the space to host private events, parties and other sort of things, and connect people with this growing roster of culinary talent that we were developing. We started to reach out to businesses and do team building events, and we started to create this really dynamic and diverse venue that was using food to create community and to connect people in unique ways. And so to illustrate this, I didn't really realize what was going to be so meaningful about this, and these things I remembered. I'll tell you a couple of quick stories. So Quinn came to the DEP at one point when we did a 6-month showcase, we're trying to showcase student culinary talent. And she was the only woman to graduate from the chef school who was completely deaf. And despite that, and despite doing an incredible internship in Shanghai, nobody would hire her. She was getting very, very demoralized. I thought, okay, this is a small one-person kitchen. You can just run this show yourself. I gave her one night a week to cook every Thursday. She did it for 6 months. She totally killed it. She did an amazing job. She got written up in the paper, parlayed that into a full-time gig out near where she lived in Oakville, and then got selected to represent Canada at the World Deaf Culinary Olympics in Copenhagen. So she did an incredible job. Another really quick one, Seema and Emery Omar dealt with a really unexpected personal tragedy in Seema's life by deciding they wanted to kind of cook. They had no idea where to start, how to go about doing this, what to do. They came to the DEP. The first time they had ever cooked for the public outside of their homes was at the DEP, and fast forward 5 years later, if you know Bombay Street Food on Bay Street, a fantastic new restaurant has opened and built on what they learned in this through this process. So finally I started to live up to what I had set out to do, to create a place where a place where interesting food things could really happen. And I say interesting, I kind of mean meaningful. It's just that would sound a lot more pretentious if I were to make that my tagline. But essentially, that's what makes them interesting. That's why people actually care. That's why a 20-suite restaurant has 7,000 followers on Facebook, because people actually care about who's cooking there, what they're making. It's their friends, their family, the people they're invested in a way that they're not in a place where the interaction is simply transactional. I think it was Patti Smith who said that let your interactions with people be transformative and not transactional. And this is a way that I've been looking to to change that. So just to kind of summarize some of the lessons learned, I didn't go in with all of these ideas, but these are the ones that emerged in how to create a space where meaningful, interesting things can happen. You have to lower the barrier to entry. This is where the low cost comes in. Basically, I got a great deal, and I paid that deal forward for 5 years to let people get in a way that they could not necessarily have afforded to do in another way. I wanted to leverage people's passion for food, something people really care about. You know, people take pictures of their lunch and post it for the world to see. I mean, people care about this, but I didn't want to see it devolve into just another commodity fetish that's measured by how much money you spend on it. If you care about food, then participate. Come and cook the meal and sell the meal and share that. I wanted to increase the diversity. It wasn't just tattooed white dudes with beards who owned all of cooking. Right? There were some grandmothers who would come in and totally mop the floor with these guys. Give everybody a place, an equal footing where they could come in and set up. Foster creativity. We can get away with things for one night. It would never work as a restaurant. We did a night that was only black and white ingredients with a black and white dress code. We did a night that was the last meal served in the Titanic. We did a night that was a Scottish Haitian fusion dinner called Voodoo Haggis. These are not things that would work as a restaurant, but for one night you can do something, and you can do it because if you fail, it's not a big deal because it's just one night, and you know. But you can take a risk that you can't take in another way. And how can you innovate if you can't fail in a way that's not catastrophic, right? And through doing this, and through connecting people through food, and through communal dining, not just communal seating, but people actually sharing meals and having interactions with people who are doing the cooking, you actually build bonds and interactions and forge community between those people. And in the process, you're creating economic opportunity and redistributing that economic opportunity. Right? So this is done without any funding. As I was just making our own gravy, and by the end of 5 years, all the debt was paid off, the building was sustainable, and I was able to renew the lease. All right, so we get to 2016. Now I'm like, okay, I've been doing 6, 7 events a week for 5 years now. I gotta take it a little bit easier this year. If you're gonna have a lifestyle business, it's really helpful to have a life that you can style. So I gotta scale back a few things during the week. And then, you know, that worked for about a month. I saw a movie, it was really great. But then, it was around this time that I also began to hear the stories of the Syrian newcomer families who were housed in hotels for weeks, even months at a time, with no access to kitchens to cook for themselves or their families. And I mean, I don't like being in a hotel for like a weekend and not being able to make something for myself. And so I thought, well, I have a big kitchen. I invite total strangers to cook in it all the time. It's really not that much of a stretch, right, to invite them to come and cook in the kitchen. It took a little while to figure out exactly how to get about doing that, but they did, and they absolutely killed it, and it was an incredible experience for everyone involved. And this said, okay, let's do this. Let's keep running with this. So I'm going to let this really quickly. How do I press play on this? Just to show. Okay, and I just 1 minute.
Everybody here, we are like a family here.
يعني وحسينا فعلا ريحة الطبخ واستمتعنا يعني نحن نطبخ بيدنا ونحط كل شيء غير شكل. حسيت حالي مولودة من جديد الصراحة.
So that is sort of where we started to realize that we were onto something really important. I had not set out to work with refugees. It was not something that I put out in my business plan, but it was the logical conclusion, the logical extension of everything that the Depreneur had ever been trying to do around building community and creating opportunity and fostering diversity and all of these things. And so we also recognized that the concept was much bigger, much more important than just what was happening in our space. That this model, this idea, could work with any newcomer community, right, in any kitchen willing to open its doors in any city in the world. Right, so this had to grow beyond our growth, but that was going to take time to do the due diligence, to do the governance, to do the work. But we founded it as a new nonprofit organization called Newcomer Kitchen. We did a crowdfunding campaign in the summer that raised $27,000, and that gave us the seed to build this into something that can take this out into the world and realize its possibility. And the media attention, the press attention has been snowballing and building ever since. And when the CDC needed to find a location to host a Syrian roundtable that they felt really belonged to the newcomer community, that's where they came to host it. So it shows the potential of the idea that it could not have happened, right, without creating the fertile soil, the space where that could have taken it. So now we're here. Newcomer Kitchen is got a board of directors. It's on its way. We just held a big. We just launched the first Syrian brunch in Canada at another restaurant. It was written up in Silver Magazine. We hosted a big fundraiser in December. We've got funds to kind of get us to the next step. Sometime mid-year, it's out in the world. All right, what's next? Well, I would like to so the debonair and all this time is now a proof of concept. It's a prototype showing what's possible. And I would love to take it beyond just a little 400 square foot storefront and a little bit basement and kitchen and build it into a truly integrated urban food hub that combines production facilities, retail and event space, and co-working office space for food organizations so that administration and advocacy can be co-located with all these other things to create an integrated food experience that I think, it's not huge, right? This whole thing, I mean, all of the Newcomer Kitchen ran for 6 months. We support over 50 families. It's put over $30,000 directly into the pocket of things. And we did it for less than the cost of the watch that Trudeau was wearing when he came. So it doesn't have to be huge, right? There's a lot of things, and everything about the DEP is done at this small human scale. The city doesn't need another $250 place to have dinner. Right? It's extremely well looked after. Corollary, the world probably doesn't need another $9,000 coffee table either. Okay. So, but this whole process, right, is not a straightforward one, right? This is, I'm forcing this into a linear narrative because I have 12 minutes to tell you about it. That is not how it unfolded. There was a lot of despair, a lot of what the hell am I doing with my life, a lot of stress, right? But the meaningful parts came from what has emerged over that process. And the overall net trajectory is where we want to be. So I'm going to try to summarize what I've learned a little bit from this whole process. Okay, how do we create spaces where meaningful things can happen? You can't buy meaning, right? But you can design for it. Right? You have to reduce risk. You have to create a safe place, a sandbox, a place where something can happen, right? And the risk of failure not be non-catastrophic. If you look at the regular restaurant business in Toronto, the barrier to entry, the cost of entry is so high, right, that the result is you can only take a safe bet to do it, and you end up with this really duplicate, this derivative thinking. If I see one more piece of barn board and an Edison bulb and a fish taco, you're going to fail all the time. Failure is a crucial part, but failure, although it hurts, it's also part of what gives it meaning. It gives it pungency. It gives it energy, right? But it has to be safe enough that you can fail and learn and pick yourself up and go. You have to keep trying, right? You have to stay loose. None of these things were in the original plan, right? So the plan has to be loose to build on. Yes, it's iterative, but it's also like your mind has to be open beyond even what you set out to see what's possible as it comes out. So you're encouraging emergence to happen, right? Saying, I'm going to go and do this, and let's see what happens, right? And working at a human scale, right? This is now essentially a one-person business in 400 square foot corner store, right? I serve the drinks. I've mopped that floor more times than I care to count. But it's at that human scale, right, where I think a lot of the meaningful interactions take place, right? There's 24 people in the room. If I did this at 100 people, it wouldn't be the same experience. All right? I believe that design and small business can be an activist medium. It has to be led by an idea of something you want to do, right? Be the change. You know the drill, right? And part of that is put others first, right? What made these meaningful are not what it did for me, right? But what it enabled to do for other people. I think we saw that in the last presentation. What other people were able to do with what I created makes it meaningful to me, right? It increases equity, right? It redistributes, right? It takes the things from the extremes of inequality and helps. It's me shaking my tiny fist at all of that, trying to bring those things closer together rather than contributing something that I feel pushes them further apart. And going into it with honesty and integrity. If I'm going in and I don't feel like what I'm doing is helping that, then I really have to stop and go, why am I doing this? So, you know, it's been sort of 6 years, been a wild ride, right? But all of this, you know, happened for less than what I think some restaurants might spend on their cappuccino machine. Right? So this is what's possible. It's a lot of work. I can't necessarily recommend it for everybody. Right? It's hard. It's not always fun, right? But it is meaningful. And then just to talk a little bit about, you know, where ideas and inspirations and things have come from this. So these are just some of the places where I've drawn ideas from that helped me and guided me along the way. All right, so thank you so much, everyone, for your time.